Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Councillor Elaine Shimbart and I'm Chairman of today's meeting of the Development Management Committee. In addition to the councillors who sit on the committee, the following officers are also in attendance. Julia Mancy, Development and Building Control Manager, Daphne Hayward, Principal Planning Officer, David Hayward, Planning Policy Manager, Steve Weaver, Development Manager, Rosanna Begum, Solicitor, Holly Weaver, Democratic Services Assistant, Cynthia Havant, Democratic Services Officer, Lisa Pax, Democratic Services Officer. Also in attendance is Chris Stanyard from Campbell Reith, who advises the Borough Council on transport planning. Can I please ask all in attendance to note that this meeting is being recorded and the recording will be published on the Council's website. IP addresses are not collected. However, in order to function, Skype for Business collects background data limited to when a user enters and leaves the meeting and the web browser version used. Data collected will be kept and recorded for the purposes of this meeting only. If at any point a member of the committee loses their connection, I shall adjourn the meeting for a short period to allow them to reconnect. As a reminder, if a member of the committee is not present for the whole duration of the item, they are precluded from voting. Could I please request the councillors and officers present at this meeting to mute their calls after they finish speaking? If you have unmuted yourself for any reason, could I please ask you to remain silent whilst we're waiting to speak? As we have guests at this meeting, I should ask that the conversation pane not to be used for any reason, unless you have a technical issue such as an audio failure and you wish to contact Democratic Services. I shall now outline how the meeting will run. The Democratic Services Officer to read any apologies for absence received from members of the committee and the names of any substitute councillors sitting in their place. I shall undertake a roll call of all councillors and officers present. For the efficiency of the meeting, I shall also ask the councillors at this point to confirm whether they have read the supplementary papers, the deputations received, and whether they have any interest to declare on any of the items being considered at this meeting. I shall then take each application on the agenda in turn. The Planning Officer will introduce the item, including answers to questions submitted by members of the committee prior to this meeting, and display a presentation visible to all parties, including members of the public. Including members of the public watching proceedings online. We shall hear the verbal deputations from those who have requested to speak at this meeting. Each speaker shall be permitted a maximum of 5 minutes to speak. Members of the council who have requested to speak shall be permitted 10 minutes in which to do so. I shall then allow each member of the committee to ask questions. Once questions have been answered, I shall move on to the debate. This will take the same format by giving members an opportunity to put their views across to the meeting. If at any point I feel that a response or intervention is required from an officer, I shall ask the relevant officer to speak. If at any point during the debate a member of the committee puts forward a motion, I shall ask them to clearly repeat the wording of the motion. I will then ask for a seconder. If you wish to second a motion, please unmute your microphone and state your name. At this point, I shall ask each councillor in turn if they wish to speak, the debate centring solely on the motion. After each councillor has been given an opportunity to speak during the debate on a motion, I shall then give the officers an opportunity to comment on the motion. I shall then ask the committee to vote. For clarity, I shall request that a recorded vote be taken and ask each committee member in turn to state for, against, or abstain. Once the vote has been taken, I shall ask the Democratic Services Officer to read out the number of councillors who voted for, against, or abstained. If carried, I shall declare the outcome. If lost, I shall resume the debate until another motion is put forward. At the conclusion of the debate and voting, the committee will have made a decision which I shall confirm before closing the meeting. I shall begin the meeting with a roll call and declarations. Mrs. Weaver, do we have any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chairman. We have apologies today from Councillor Satchwell, and Councillor Guest will be her deputy.
Thank you. As a member of the committee, I can confirm that I've read the officer's report, deputations received and supplementary agenda, and have no interest to declare in any of the items being considered at this meeting. First of all, Councillor Crelling, can you please confirm your attendance, whether you have read the officer's report, supplementary papers and the public declarations received, and state whether you have any interest to declare in any of the items being considered at this meeting?
Thank you, Chairman. I am present and I have read all the relevant papers and I have no interest to declare.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Guest, can I please ask the same of you?
Chairman, I have read the papers, I am present and I have no interest to declare.
Thank you, Councillor Guest. Councillor Howard, can I please ask the same of you?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I can confirm I am present. I have read all the papers and supplementary papers for this evening's meeting and I have nothing to declare.
Thank you. Councillor Keys?
Good evening, Madam Chairman. Yes, I am present. I confirm that I have read all the relative papers and I confirm that I have no interest in any items before us this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Keys. Councillor Lloyd?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I confirm I'm present. I've read the report, the deputations received, the supplementary papers, and I have no interest to declare on any of the items on the agenda.
Thank you. And lastly, Councillor Lowe?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I confirm my attendance. I have read the relevant papers and I have no interest to declare.
Thank you very much. Can the officers please confirm their attendance? First of all, Miss Mansi, sorry.
Present, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Miss Hayward?
Present, Chairman, thank you.
Miss Bigham?
Present, Chair, thank you.
Miss Weaver?
Present, Chairman, thank you.
Mr. Weaver?
Present, Chairman, thank you.
Mr. Hayward?
Present, Chairman, thank you.
Mr. Havant?
Present, Chairman, thank you.
And Miss Papps?
Present, Chairman, thank you.
Mr. Stanyard?
That's present, Madam Chairman, thank you.
Thank you very much. Item 2 of the minutes. Members, the minutes of the site briefing for this item have been circulated by email and published on the Council's website. Does anybody have any amendments to these minutes? Right, so these minutes have been received. Thank you very much, members. I shall now proceed to the application to be considered at this meeting, which is land at Sinah Lane, Hayling Island, at number -18-00724. Ms. Hayward, would you please like to introduce the application? Could you also please include in your presentation answers to the pre-submitted questions and highlight any new issues in your verbal update? Thank you.
Hello, Holly. I've come out of sharing screen. Can you arrange for me to get back in, please?
Yep, I think my connection just dropped and it took away the presentation. I'll try and upload it now.
All right, thank you. Yes, it's now displaying, thank you.
Thank you.
Right, this application relates to land at Sinah Lane, Hayling Island. It's for the erection of 195 dwellings, associated open space and other ancillary matters. In addition, the proposal is for a change of use of the land to a Wade and Brent refuge area. In terms of papers before you, you have the main report, which sets out the proposal, the consultation responses, and the recommendation. In addition, you have the addendum of the 28th of October, which provides an update and also provides an answer to the questions raised at the site briefing. So what I'll do is I will go through the proposal and then I will go on to the addendum matters, the update. So in terms of the site, it's the site that is outlined in red. You can see Newtown on the location plan, but it's the outline in red which lies just to the left or west of that irregular, elongated site that adjoins the harbour at its northern end. You can see the surrounding development, the development to the south and west and east is fairly well developed. This provides details of the site in respect to Langton Harbour, and that is relevant because the surface water drainage will be draining into Langton Harbour. So an aerial photograph with the site outlined in red, again showing the harbour and showing the extent of the built-up area. As I said, there are two elements to this application. There's a housing site, which is that part to the south, and the bird refuge site, which is the part to the north, adjacent to the harbour, and is where the area opens up. So the housing development extends, or would extend the proposal as far as the housing development in North Shore Road. In terms of determining the application is actually the subject of an appeal as set out in your papers. Therefore, this application is before committee members so that they can determine or resolve what they would have determined had they been in a position to do so, and then that would form the basis for the council's text. So this slide shows the character of the existing area. As you can see, particularly on the western side in North Shore Road, it's a fairly spacious, low-density development. And also in terms of Sinah Lane, the properties, a large number of them are detached, set in reasonable sized gardens. Further to the east, beyond the industrial areas, the development is more dense and includes the more recently developed development called the Oysters. So the application, or the site is the subject of housing allocation in the emerging local plan, which is H226, and that allocation is for housing and the refuge area. So in terms of the proposal, the housing layout has a single access of Sinah Lane on the southern boundary of the site. There is an existing gap between the properties there which is not developed, and that allows for access into the site. As said previously, the northern extent of the development corresponds with the northern extent of North Shore Road. The proposal is mainly for two-storey housing. There are a few 2.5-storey houses, and in addition, towards the centre of the site, there are 3-storey flatted blocks. All right. So just looking at the proposal, this gives you an indication of the mass of the development and how it sits in relation to the surrounding properties. You can see that the proposal includes areas within the centre of the site of planting, open space, and also along the boundaries, particularly with the Hayling Trail, which lies to the south, that additional planting is proposed along there to provide a break between the housing development and that trail. So this is the area for the wintering bird refuge, and under this proposal that would be managed by the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds. The developer is in discussions, in negotiations with them to transfer that land. I should say, and those are proceeding, although they are not yet concluded. You will see as we get further on to the proposal that that would need to be the subject of a legal agreement, and without that mitigation land, the proposal would not be acceptable. So in terms of the housing mix, there's 195 houses. The split is that 137 would be private and 58 would be affordable. That equates to just under the 30%, half a unit, and a contribution for that remaining half unit would be the subject of a legal agreement. So that gives you the housing mix in terms of the affordable mix, the number of 2-bedroom, 2, 3 and 4, and then the private mix of 2, 3 and 4 as well. So in terms of highway works, part of the recommendation is for a legal agreement to secure a contribution to highway works. That would go to works to be carried out following the Hayling Island transport assessment, and there are 5 matters identified, 5 improvement areas along the A303, which are those improvements that have been identified in respect to the proposed local plan allocations. So that was what the comprehensive scheme would be. That's what would be required to support the proposed allocations in the emerging local plan. So as part of this proposal, there would be a contribution to highways of £679,000, which would be the subject of a legal agreement, and that would be for the county to carry out works on the A3023. In terms of actually what that would deliver, you'll see as we progress that the friction reduction schemes, which have been identified in the update paper, would be costed at that rate. But I would say that the contribution is part of a more comprehensive requirement in respect to the local plan sites. So in terms of the affordable housing, these are spread through the development, but in clusters, and there are quite a few that are, they're mainly in houses, although there are some flatted properties towards the centre of the site. This gives you the story height plans, which is particularly relevant when we come on to the further slides I have, because along that southern boundary with the properties in Sinah Lane, it is 2-storey development, with the exception of those 2 plots which are outlined in blue, which are 2.5-storey. You can also see on that plan that the 3-storey development outlined in green is centred, is located to the centre of the site, away from the boundaries with existing residential properties. So the proposal is for the roads to be adopted, other than the private drives which come off those roads. In addition, this slide indicates the 2 proposed links to the Hayling Billy, which also would be adopted, and it indicates the location of the pumping station as well, in proximity to the attenuation basin that lies on the northern edge of the residential properties. So in terms of phasing, the applicant is proposing that the scheme would be carried out in 5 phases, with the pink area, which is just off the access road, being the first phase, followed by the second phase being the purple, the blue and the green, and then the small area of orange is where the site compound would be located, and that would be done last. Associated with each of those phases is an area of open space that would be delivered in association with the development of those phases. So in terms of the appearance of the development, this is, indicates the mix of flats and houses, and also we have the elevations of the 2.5-storey houses. The street scenes, again, variety in the form of the dwellings, with properties broken up by the gaps, either of garages or drives. And further indication of the form of the development and the use of different materials, brick and cladding, to provide interest to the development. So just further street scenes. As you can see, the properties are spaced to provide an interesting and broken street scene. This is the example of the form of the houses. And further examples, this one being a 4-bedroom property, and the maisonettes, and then the flats. The flats also include cladding to break up the elevation. So further examples giving you the appearance that we have of a traditional development, brick and tile construction and pitched roofs. And a number of them have features such as the canopies over the doors and brick courses. So this is the 2.5-storey property, and at the second floor it does include 2 bedrooms. One of those bedrooms would be served by a dormer window onto the street, and the other by a roof light. So in terms of the relationship with the adjoining properties, the slide indicates at the top of the screen the existing properties. The north-south aspect has been turned round to allow for the comparison of the plan over those properties. And then below is an extract from the submitted plan, and I've given an indication of the separation distance of one of the properties, indicating that there is a good level of separation between the existing properties and the proposed properties. So this is taken from number 6. Perhaps I'll just go back so you can have a look at where we are there. Number 6 is the property that, as you look at the slide, lies to the left of the access road. So the access road would run between number 6 and number 10, Sinah Lane. So this is looking across the access road along up the site. And then this is taken from the rear, looking towards looking north. And a further slide from this property. Members may recall at the site briefing that a video of the site was provided for members to understand the context of the site. So this is taken from 14 Sinah Lane, and as you can see it follows a period of heavy rain, and I'll proceed on to the drainage as we progress. However, I would say that the drainage has been designed to accommodate for the surface water, and that it is to be dealt with by the way of a sub scheme with holding tanks and swales, which would then go to attenuation basin, and then from there it would go out by existing ditches into the harbour. Right, so moving on to number 16 to 20A Sinah Lane and the properties that lie to the rear. Again, we have well in excess of 20 metre separation. You'll see that I've also indicated the garden depth of the proposed property, the smallest garden depth, and all of the properties of the proposed development, other than one, which I'll come on to shortly, are 10 metres or more in accordance with our design guide. You can also, if you look at this plan at the bottom, on the right hand side, plots number 180 and 181, that's a 2.5 storey development. So this is the view from 20A Sinah Lane, and as you can see, the aspect is currently very open across the field. So again, looking at the relationship with properties in Sinah Lane and the distances involved, again, I've shown 180 and 181 on this slide, and we've got a separation distance of 26 metres to the rear of the existing property in Sinah Lane. So in terms of street scenes for those plots that we've just looked at, this shows you how the bulk of development works, how a number of roofs have been hit to provide a break, and also that there is separation provided by the garages and the fencing in this location.
Hello Daphne, sorry, it's Councillor Lloyd.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you. There have been a few comments in the comments box that we're not actually seeing the presentation. I'm stuck on the view from 14 Sinah Lane, and other members have got other presentation issues.
Diane, log out and log in again, you'll get it back.
Oh, okay.
If I could say, Councillor Guest here, that I've tried doing that and I've got nothing, but I'm relying on the information I'd have at hand in paper form, but I've seen nothing on the screen.
Okay, mine has just moved to the, without me doing anything, I've now got the slide 22 to 30 Sinah Lane, so.
Madam Chairman, what would you like me to do? Would you like me to briefly run through it again?
Yes, I'm still stuck on the view from across the water, across the fields. It hasn't moved from there.
There we are. That's that view. That's slide 35 of 69.
Slides aren't, it's not changing.
You haven't got the number?
No, I haven't. Just view
Chairman, I'm going to try, Chairman, Councillor Guest, I'm going to try and log out and log back in as Councillor Keast recommends.
Chairman, Julia Manzi here. Can I suggest that we have a short adjournment while we try and sort out a few of these technical issues?
Yes, I agree. Yes, go ahead. Hopefully we can
continue once we've got a few people sorted.
All right, thank you.
Anybody who's still in the chat who's having difficulties with the presentation and would like to leave and try and come back in, if you just want to let me know and I can keep an eye out for you.
Okay, Holly, I'm logging out now. I'm back in. David Guest, I shall try and get back in. So here we go.
Lovely, thank you, Councillor Guest.
Hello, Holly, it's Councillor Howard. Yes, I'm going to do the same because mine disappeared, and I did get it up though on another device via the HBC website, but it's very slow, so I'll do the same.
Okay, lovely, thank you.
Hello, Holly, mine seems to be all right now. Seems to be moving.
I think it may be a combination of well, the weather first and foremost.
Probably.
And the number.
But mine seems to have righted itself now.
Of slides, and then possibly the number of people within the meeting. If we can take it slow and steady, and everybody just let.
Holly, you keep breaking up. I don't know what's going on. During the presentations, the same thing happened.
I think it could well be the weather conditions affecting this. I don't know, I'm only guessing.
Councillor Keast, you seem to be one of the few people who are having that problem. All of us are very clear. It suggests it may be your connection.
I've come out and come in again, so I'll see how it goes.
Okay, bear with us. Hopefully it will keep going.
Chairman, would you like me to go back to the start of these slides where I'm indicating the layout relative to existing development?
Yes, it seemed to be stuck on, I think problems started after the view from 14, the view across the fields.
Chairman,
Okay.
Chairman David Guest, I've still got no pictures. I've logged out and come back in again.
You still have nothing?
Nothing. I can hear you perfectly, but that's it.
But there's
nothing,
yes.
The officers.
Holly, do you have any suggestions to rectify this?
If Daphne, if you would like to try and load the slides from your side, it may be my connection that's causing the difficulty because my internet is very flaky this evening.
Okay, I'm not sure how to do that, so could you talk me through that, Holly, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So down the bottom, there's a button that says Share Content.
Oh, right, okay, I've got that, yes.
Yep, if you want to click Share PowerPoint Files.
PowerPoint files, yep.
And then if you'd like to try and find it through the folders there, it may take a couple of minutes to upload, but it may prove to be a stronger connection as you're in the office.
Okay, so it's gone into my desktop, is that what you mean? And I open it from there?
Yep, so when you click Share PowerPoint Files, it should come up with your folders to go through the J drive, and you should be able to find the presentation in there.
Right, okay. Yeah. Holly, I'm in shared and the DMC presentation, but I can't find it in there.
It should be right at the very bottom, Sinah Lane.
Oh, yep, found it now.
Thank you.
Because I'm uploading Sinah Lane, so hopefully that's it.
Well,
Right, members, if you can bear with me, it is loading.
Thank you.
Right, it has now loaded and I can start sharing when you'd like me to start, Chairman, and if you'd like to say where you'd like me to start from.
If you could start from where the problems started arising, I think.
Okay.
Please.
I will then go, I'll go on to that, and then I will check with you whether, or perhaps you can check that everybody is actually receiving it in the order that it should be.
Yes, fine.
Okay. Right. So, the proposal for the 195 dwellings, the location plan, which is showing the surrounding development and the relationship with the harbour.
I've still got no images, Daphne.
I think it may be an iPad issue rather than a connection issue then. That's the only thing I can think of.
I'm not unduly concerned as I've seen them all and I've got some of them here, so I'm happy with that.
Councillor Howard, are you able to keep watching it via the public broadcast? Is that still displaying on there?
That's, at the moment, it's saying broadcast will resume in a moment, but otherwise I'm watching it on my, I've got the meeting up on my Mac desktop, so I'm not actually seeing the broadcast on there, but I'm fine because I have also got all the papers.
Lovely, thank you. Any other members of the committee that are having this issue, please let us know now and we can see if we can rectify it for you. In which case, Daphne, if you'd like to carry on, taking it very slowly and to double checking every time if we've got everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly. Right, okay. What is displaying at the moment is the location plan, putting the site in context to the harbour and the surrounding development. The next slide shows Langston Harbour and the boundary of the bird refuge part of the site with the harbour, and again it shows the surrounding development. Moving on to the next slide, this is an aerial photograph with the site outlined in red. I'm talking relatively slowly just to give time for the slides to catch up, but you can again see the relationship with the built area, and you can also see the harbour and the way the channels are in the harbour, you know, when the tide flows out and when it comes back in again along those channels and fills up. So in terms of the proposal, there are two elements: a housing site located to the south and bounded by existing residential development to the west, i.e. to the left of the slide, and to the south, which is towards the bottom, and then the Hayling Billy towards the east of the site. Beyond that, in the area where the site extends out to the harbour, is the proposed bird refuge area. This slide provides a bit more detail of the existing character. The existing character in North Shore Road and Sinah Lane is for relatively large houses in large plots. Further to the east, where we have the newer development in the oysters, and development further to the east generally is more dense in character. This slide just shows you the housing allocation in the emerging local plan. In terms of the housing layout, access is taken off Sinah Lane between 6 and 10 Sinah Lane, where there is an existing gap in the street frontage. The proposal is for primarily two-storey housing, with a limited number of 2.5-storey housing and flats, blocks of flats located towards the centre of the site. So in terms of the proposal, this slide gives an indication of the bulk of development and how it sits with the surrounding development. So in terms of the winter bird mitigation, that is the area in green. And as part of this proposal, the developer has entered into negotiations in respect to transferring that land to the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, who would then take on management of that area so that it would be a permanent provision for the wintering birds and could be appropriately managed. That would need to be the subject of a legal agreement as set out in the recommendation. In terms of the housing mix, this slide indicates the number of private at 137 and the number of affordable at 58. 58 represents just under 30%, and the half a unit to make it up to 30% would be the subject of a contribution which is proposed as part of the legal agreement. So in terms of the affordable housing, we've got a mix of 2, 3 and 4 bedrooms. And the private housing is also a mix of 2, 3 and 4 bedrooms. In terms of highway works, the Hayling Island Transport Assessment has looked at the traffic flows onto and out of the island and identified the need for improvements along the A303 to accommodate the proposed development under the emerging local plan. And as part of this, it has identified a number of areas that require works. The proposal provides a contribution of £679,000 to the works, and in terms of what that would deliver, they would deliver the friction reduction schemes along part of the A303. The contribution would be the subject of a legal agreement for these works. Right, this is the affordable housing plan, showing that the affordable housing is located throughout the site, in the houses and also in the flat blocks. The storey height plan indicates in red the 2 stories and in blue the 2.5 stories, which are generally set away from the boundaries, although there are some cases where they are in proximity to the boundaries, and I'll provide further information on that in the next few slides. The green properties are the 3-storey flatted blocks. So in terms of the adoption plan, this is the area indicated in pink. The adoption plan also provides footpaths to connect to the Hayling Billy. In addition, the location of the pumping station is indicated towards the top of the slide. Phasing plan to develop, the site would be developed in 5 phases, and each phase would incorporate an area of open space. So the first phase would be that of the pink phase coming off the access road, then the area that lies to the west and the purple would be developed next, then onto the blue and the green, and the final phase, the orange, is where the site compound would be located. So in terms of the appearance of the development, the next few slides provide a series of what the development would look like in terms of the bulk, the materials and the design, and how the breaks in the development as well, with drives and garages providing that break. I'm going through these quite quickly because I think that they are keeping up with, the presentation is keeping up. And the flatted development, use of cladding to break up that, the appearance of that. This is a 2.5-storey property. There would be 2 bedrooms in the roof. One would be served by a roof light, which is in the rear elevation, and then there would be a dormer in the front. So in terms of the relationship with the existing dwellings,
Chairman, if I, it's Steve Weaver, if I just pop in there, I think we're pretty much up to where we were when we adjourned, so I don't know whether, Holly, you would want the chairman to effectively reconvene the meeting at this point?
Yep, so although it has continued to be broadcast, the meeting will formally resume from this point, Chairman, if that's okay with you?
Yes, that's fine, Holly. Yes.
Lovely, thank you very much.
right, thank you, Chairman. I'll resume the presentation. Right, so this slide shows the properties in Sinah Lane, with number 6 and 10 lying to either side of the access road. The north-south has been, well, it's been rotated by 180 degrees so that we could show you the proposed plots relative to the existing footprint of the houses. The slide indicates the separation between properties in the region of 30 metres, perhaps a bit less in places where you have a back-to-back relationship. And this is a slide provided by the resident showing the view from their property across the access road and into the application site. Also taken from 6 Sinah Lane, looking down the application site. And again taken from number 6 Sinah Lane to give you an indication of the outlook from these properties. And this is taken from number 14 Sinah Lane, which indicates that the site does have surface water on it. The proposed drainage scheme has been designed to take account of the drainage system with the use of holding tanks. There's a subsystem with the use of holding tanks and then use of swales as well to convey the water to a attenuation basin before it then goes via ditches out into the harbour. As part of that drainage system, filtration would be provided to take out the pollutants. So in terms of 16 to 28 Sinah Lane, again indicating the relationship, plots 180 to 181, those are 2 of the 2.5-storey houses, but we have a separation distance of 26 metres between them and the rear of properties in Sinah Lane, which more than satisfies the Borough Design Guide for 24 metres. And then this is the view taken from 28 Sinah Lane, looking across the field. So moving on to 22 and to 30 Sinah Lane. Again, if you look on the left-hand part of the screen of the proposed plan, 180 to 180 and 181 is indicated on that again. And as well, you have the separation between 176 and the property that lies to the rear. So we have a good level of separation between the properties. So this provides street scenes and shows you the form of the development. And in particular, this is a street scene that would lie behind those properties, and you can see in that on the bottom, streetscape number 2 is a 2.5-storey development. But looking at the street scene in general, the bulk of development is broken up with the use of the hipped roofs and the spacing between properties. So this is what those properties would actually see, because this is their rear view of those proposed properties. So in terms of 6 to 14 North Shore Road, as I mentioned previously, all of the properties, proposed properties except for one, have a rear garden of 10 metres or greater. The maisonette that lies behind number 8 North Shore Road, the garden depth is 9.9 metres. However, if you look at the separation, you can see that the separation is well in excess of 30 metres for that property. And indeed, the adjacent property has a separation distance of 42 metres from 6 number North Shore Road to the maisonettes at 172 to 173. This is the view from number 10 North Shore Road, looking out towards the field and the existing planting. And then from number 12 North Shore Road. Number 14 to number 13 North Shore Road. It's not been possible to align these up, I'm afraid, but you can see the relationship with the surrounding development, and that the sort of back-to-back situation is such that generally the relationship is at an angle. In the looking at the site plan, the layout plan, you'll see that in the left-hand corner of the site layout plan, abutting numbers 22 and 24, there is an area that's greyed out, which is a triangle of land which is part of the field and the ownership, but the proposal is to actually convey that to those owners, but that would be a separate non-planning matter and not actually material consideration. So in terms of the view from 16 North Shore Road, and this is a site photo from 20 North Shore Road. I would remind members that at the site viewing there was a video presented to members providing details of the context of the site and the surrounding development. Moving on to 32 to 42 North Shore Road. These are substantial properties, low density development with relatively long, large gardens. So this indicates the proposal which would back onto those properties and the level of separation that would be provided. So this is the view from number 32 North Shore Road. Moving on to 44 to 64 North Shore Road. Again, we have fairly substantial detached properties set in good sized plots. And this is the relationship between the proposed development and those properties, with an indication of the separation distances that are involved. So this is an older photograph of the site in 2018, apologies. And then this is more current, taken this current year of the site. The site has not been cultivated this last season, as you can see, and although I understand it has more recently been ploughed again. So some of the representations have made reference to erosion on the coast and the proposed refuge area. The coastal team has been made aware of this, as has the RSPB, who it is intended would take on the refuge area. They are satisfied that the provision that would be provided under the refuge is acceptable, and the coastal team have not raised any particular concerns in respect to the proposal. So this is the rear from the properties in Sinah Lane. Again, you can see that there is surface water lying on there, and the drainage strategy has been designed having regard to the levels, and also, as you'll see in your update papers, in regard to the fact that the site can be tide locked on occasions. As you can see, this is a recent photograph. As you can see, the field was in the process of being cloud. So again, a further photograph looking towards properties in North Shore Road. So, in terms of the proposal, you have quite a detailed report before you. You will see that there are a large number of consultees, and because the application has evolved and changed during the course of its life, mainly in response to initial comments from the consultees also have provided a number of responses. However, I can confirm that the consultees are all content with the application, subject to conditions and the requirements of the legal agreement, the obligations set out in the report. Other than the tree wardens, who you will note do have an objection, however, the tree wardens are not actually a statutory or a non-statutory consultee, but they have been included because they are a particular group. The council's arborist has assessed the proposal and is content with the proposal as now submitted. So in terms of the consideration, it's necessary to assess the overall planning balance. As part of that, the site does lie outside the built-up area. However, there are considerations that weigh in its favour. The site is identified in the emerging local plan and is required and included for the 5-year housing land supply purposes. It benefits from open space provision, and that includes not only play area, but 2 areas of orchard as well. The visual impact, it is a relatively well-contained site, and the visual impact is limited, and it would be further impacted by the landscaping proposed. The proposal involves funding for the highway network and also has been designed with the safe access of Sinah Lane according to the requirements of Hampshire County Council. The site can be adequately drained. It complies with the design guide, and the development provides mitigation for the impact on protected areas and species. The site has been the subject of an appropriate assessment, and this has been agreed by Natural England. So overall, the conclusion is that there are public benefits from the environmental and social and economic dimensions, and as such the proposal is considered sustainable development and is recommended for permission subject to conditions and legal agreement. So that is the layout. So now turning to the addendum, I will give you a summary of the update. We have a consultation response from the coastal team who are satisfied with the proposal and have no further comments to make. This was in response to concerns about coastal erosion. In addition, we have 6 representations and making a total of 568 representations received. The 18 further representations are all objections. In the main, they cover the points that are already set out in the committee report, with a few exceptions. The first one being about possible adverse impacts onto Station Road, that traffic calming should be required there. However, that is not something that Hampshire Highway have sought. Also, that the 3-storey housing will result in loss of privacy, and building bungalows would be more appropriate. However, the separation distances provided do comply with our adopted guidance. Reference is made to the lack of a site visit. However, as previously advised, there was a video which provided a context for the development and the form of the surrounding development. and that also there was concern about the impact on trees, but as stated previously, the arboriculturist has assessed the proposal. In terms of ecology, it's been identified that there has been an increase in wildlife use. This has been run past the county ecologist, who says that given that the land has not been in productive use, that would be to expected, and actually is an exceptional change. Had the land been cultivated, then there would have been less activity. A further HRA and AA has been carried out to reflect the recent nutrient changes, and that's been agreed by Natural England. You will see in the report that there is also an amendment to the condition in respect to lighting and an additional condition in respect to the provision of bat enhancement features. Right, in terms of the additional information requested by the site viewing, further details on the highway work has been provided, and it sets out the what the 679,000 would provide in terms of works to the highways. However, in terms of those improvements to the highways, this would need to be part of a comprehensive scheme set out in the Hayling Island Transport Assessment. Further details of the surface water drainage have been provided, and this is set out in the update. In particular, that there would be a management company who would be responsible for the maintenance, and this would be subject to a legal agreement. Right, in terms of the density of the existing buildings, as set out, the density varies, but it's 20 dwellings per less in North Shore Road and Sinah Lane. The Oysters development is 34 dwellings to the hectare, and this one is 41 dwellings to the hectare. Yeah. Right, okay, sorry, I've turned over 2 pages at once. The grade, the agricultural land grade is 3A, and in addition, the further question was details of the tidal log and how this would work. I have been in consultation with the Environment Agency over this, and they are satisfied with the proposal. The situation is that whilst at very high tides, tidal lock, and other conditions as well actually, tidal lock can occur, the drainage scheme has been designed to accommodate this, and the situation is that the outlet into the harbour, when the tide is high and above the level of the outlet, there is a valve that stops, or a flap that stops the water entering the system, and in addition the proposed attenuation base as part of this scheme would also control flows into the ditches there, and then once the tide had gone out, then the system would unlock, allowing the water to drain away. Right, so the density of the development, as I said, the current scheme is at 41 dwellings per hectare. It is more dense than the existing development, but it does reflect the policy in the emerging local plan, which is looking at a minimum net density of 40 dwellings to the hectare, and also the position of the National Planning Framework Plan, which looks at making the most effective use of land. In terms of the sustainability of the proposal, the location is considered sustainable, well located to facilities, and with bus provision in proximity, and also the proposal in terms of low carbon design provides measures to facilitate this, including electrical vehicle charging points to all of the garages, and also takes a fabric approach to the development with higher levels of insulation and higher performing windows to provide a development with a B rating, or in terms of trying to minimise the impact on the development. So the recommendation before you is one of, had members been in a position to determine the application, that they would have been minded to grant planning permission subject to a legal agreement and the conditions set out in the committee report, but to be amended condition 9 in respect to the lighting to take account of the impact on bats, an additional condition 26 in terms of bat enhancement features within the built environment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Hayward. Members, we have received 12 public deputations in respect to this item, 6 of whom are present to deliver their deputations at this meeting. All deputations submitted have been published on the Council's website, included in the supplementary papers and read by members of the committee. In the committee meeting on the 1st of October this year, the committee agreed to permit deputations delivered verbally as part of the meeting. We have received 6 requests to speak. To facilitate this, I have agreed to relax the usual time limit of 5 minutes for objectors to 5 minutes per speaker. Your time will start when you start speaking, and please remember to unmute your microphone before speaking and to mute again afterwards. I'll just point out at this point, 30 seconds before the time lapses, the allocated time, you will hear a bell. This just indicates that you have 30 seconds left. It's a kind of warning more than anything. Once you've made your deputation, can I ask that you please leave, and you will then be able to follow the remainder of the meeting via the public link on the Council's website. So, Mrs. Brooks, would you like to make your deputation now, please?
Hello, Pat Brooks speaking on behalf of Havant Friends of the Earth and Havant Climate Alliance. Can you hear me? Are you able to hear me?
So, yes, I can hear you
Yes.
perfectly.
Okay.
I just muted.
Yeah, this application should not receive planning permission on the following environmental grounds. 1, it will add to the incremental loss of spa supporting sites for Brent geese and waders on Hayling Island and across the Solent. It provides essential winter foraging adjacent to Langstone Harbour. If the development must go ahead, the proposal to turn part of the site into a nature reserve managed by the RSPB is desirable but will not adequately compensate. Also, we do not think that bird aware can provide adequate mitigation for building on or beside land previously used by birds. The enroachment of habitation in itself will be a deterrent for many birds, even if local residents have been educated about them. 2, for water quality, by Natural England methodology, this development will result in a nutrient reduction, theoretically good. However, the assessment has not factored in the RSPB proposal to apply 50 to 70 kilograms of fertiliser to the reserve in autumn, nor the impact of grazing animals if used. Any reduction of nutrients leaching from the land must be balanced against the increase in storm water discharges from Bud's farm, which damage water quality. Natural England methodology does not adequately cover this. We remain concerned that the development will reduce water quality overall and damage our seagrass beds, which are vital in combating climate change. 3, we will lose productive agricultural land classified as best and most versatile. Land of this quality is very limited in the UK, so this site should remain in production, especially in relation to Brexit and the need for food security. However, if the development is given permission, the following conditions should apply. 4 and 5, we need increasing tree cover to support carbon reduction and a greater net gain in biodiversity. Species-rich planting of hedges and trees, including some larger native trees, and appropriate underplanting are needed around the site boundaries and across the site, with a management plan to care for them. These can provide wildlife corridors. Fences should have ground level holes to allow small mammals to travel through, and a variety of bird nesting boxes and bat boxes should be attached to houses or large trees. Homes should not be placed too close to trees, causing pressure to prune, and the number of homes should be reduced to allow for this. 6. The site already attracts Brent geese and waders in large numbers. The proposed nature reserve needs to be prepared and ready for the birds before work on house building starts. Noisy building work should be avoided between October and March. 7. Some of the Barratt Homes fabric first approach is good, such as better insulation and wastewater heat recovery, but it will only partially meet the Council's emerging policy for low carbon design. Solar PV or heat pumps can be installed more cheaply at building stage rather than expensively retrofitted later. And 8, to encourage cycling, it's positive that all properties will have cycle stores. It's important that these are secure and large enough for 3 to 4 bikes. If there is to be only one access point onto the Hayling Trail, it should be at the northern end of the site, so that cyclists from the northern end are not deterred by having to go the long way round. An EV charging point should be available not just by garages, but to encourage transfer to electric vehicle use at all parking spaces. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Brooks. Can I please ask Mrs. Skennerton?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hang on, you can hear me. Good evening, Madam Chairman, councillors and officers. My name is Anne Skennerton. I'm speaking for Hayling residents who are convinced that this application is premature, without essential and substantial improvements to our road links and coastal protection before this large-scale development. The whole of our island's viability in the coming years will be increasingly at risk. Please take seriously the following concerns, as they are just a few of the material considerations indicating the need not to approve this major housing development on Hayling. The local plan's evidence reports, read one after the other, provide inconsistent evidence. Reports state that the borough has the second lowest job density figure in Hampshire, and that a large number of Hayling residents commute beyond the borough. Where is the evidence that a high number of suitable jobs will be created on Hayling, or even in the borough, to cater for hundreds of new householders? House building is short-term and won't be there for the new residents. Where is the justification for a housing development for 195 families, most if not all of whom must drive to work off the island, adding to the borough's and of course Hayling's existing transport problems. What about their children? Even now, many Hayling children are driven to schools and colleges on the mainland. Where is the evidence that these 195 families will behave differently? There is no evidence that even current islanders regard our road network as safe enough to let children cycle to school. Promised cycle connections still haven't materialised, so walking or cycling to school is completely unrealistic for many. Where is the costing and the monies now to make Hayling's transport assessment changes? How can it be sensible to build hundreds of new homes before the proposed redesign of the only road on and off the island? Hayling's annual 5,000 visitors and over 17,000 residents routinely experience sometimes dangerous gridlock on the A3023 caused by accidents or utility problems. These directly affect work, study, hospital appointments, plus daily emergency vehicle access all through the year. How can it be wise or remotely reasonable to build hundreds more homes before proposed road changes? And how can we, or you, be really sure that the changes will even work? Scrutiny of Hayling's regeneration documents reveal no supporting evidence, no costing, no timescale for the still experimental autonomous vehicle and bridge. Floating this idea as regeneration fails to address the need for a realistic solution to Hayling's actual ever-increasing gridlock. Worse still, Hayling's Billy Trail, which even an evidence-based document demonstrates is of real importance for cycling and walking, is simultaneously being proposed as an emergency access route in the Hayling Transport Assessment. Hayling's proposed regeneration with jobs for West Beach has been literally washed away by the sea, losing in 1 year the expected 20-year beach erosion. Parking lost, beach huts moved, the municipal Par 3 golf club meters away from tidal surges, and the currently dumped shingle covering up this loss is only temporary. West Beach will be left to find its own alignment. We need the right homes, but at the right time, in the right place. We need infrastructure first. Please reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Skennerton. Mrs. Law, would you like to make your deputation now, please?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
This primary support site for the protected species of Brent geese and waders measures 12.4 hectares, yet only 5.7 hectares of the land is to be kept as an on-site refuge. To mitigate completely the land loss for both this development and the previous Oysters development, another proposed refuge, known as E26, needs to run alongside. It is stated in the officer's report that E26 is adjacent to the on-site refuge, but this is not the case. E26 is separated from this site by a salt marsh, causing fragmentation in the Brent geese network. E26 itself lies within the flood zone 3, and just like northwest boundary of this development, it is already rapidly degraded by coastal erosion. Even the Hayling Billy Trail was to be moved inland to avoid this erosion. What this means in practice is that land that is set aside to mitigate for land loss to development is already decreasing in size. So it's not sustainable now and certainly won't be for the lifetime of the development. Currently, crop rotation is used on this greenfield site, which reduces the amount of fertiliser and pesticides required. Changing the land use to a bird refuge will require monocropping, needing increased use of fertiliser and pesticides. The structure of the soil will also deteriorate, making nutrient runoff into Langston Harbour much worse. Furthermore, the proposed refuges need to actually be shown to work over several winters prior to development. As seen in the officer's report, there is still no clear evidence of an obligatory binding agreement for the future management of these refuges. The flood risk assessment, only published in March this year, raises many alarming issues. Not only does it confirm Southern Water has now rejected any future involvement in the surface water runoff elements of the SUDS, it also shows that Langston Harbour will now be the final destination of surface water from this site. Two key revelations that really do cast doubt on the sustainability of this proposed drainage system. Underground fresh water is proven to lie very close to the surface of this site, just 45 centimetres below ground level in some areas. The site has less permeable clay layer, which currently separates surface water from the groundwater. This layer will be compromised by development. The clay layer would be punctured by man-made structures such as housing foundations which go deeper than a metre, making a link between the groundwater and the surface water. So attempting to drain this surface water by pumping will also result in pumping up an endless supply of groundwater beneath this field that also rises and falls with the tide locking. This drainage technique cannot be feasible for this site. Continual pumping, disturbance and extraction of groundwater from beneath a clay layer is a known cause of subsidence. This will result in a serious issue which not only this development affects but also existing houses. Currently a huge volume of surface water floods this site and is held visibly on the surface for many months. This does not flow anywhere, it slowly evaporates or seeps gradually into the groundwater. The proposed attenuation pond is likely to reach capacity in winter. The SUDS will then need to move water rapidly off-site at the same rate and volume, generated by precipitation and tidal forces, squeezing the groundwater up, which again will be made worse by rising sea level. The rate and volume of this overflow will overwhelm any filtration system, and this overflow will contain a build-up of decades of fertiliser, as well as pollutants and nutrients from households and building processes. It is absolutely unacceptable that not only will this contaminated water be deliberately directed into off-site fragile habitats such as the salt marsh and ancient natural ponds, but will end up draining out into Langston Harbour. This is very similar to what happens to Southern Water's raw sewage after heavy rainfall, in what some would describe as a licensed discharge. Others would describe this as a reasonably foreseeable failure of planning and insufficient infrastructure capacity, certainly not a starting point for development. Now that Southern Water has refused to be involved, the surface water drainage scheme represents a real threat, and not only to the new and existing homes, but even ecologically sensitive off-site environments. This proposal is clearly not a sustainable development. The mitigation for the transport network, drainage and ecology will not prevent a severe development, causing irreversible damage for the future. Thank you for letting me speak, and I hope my contribution can help inform your decision making. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Law. Can I please have Mr. Parham, would you like to make your deputation now?
Thank you. I would like to take you back to 2013 when the inspector said of the local plan, I concur that growth on Hayling Island should be limited or restricted to take account of flood risk, the need to minimise impact on the natural environment of Chichester and Langston Harbours, and access difficulties on the local road network at peak hours. This opinion was not followed. Housing has continued unabated, and the housing target has increased from 660 to over 1,100. In 2017, recognising the unique risks and constraints, it was necessary to take an all-encompassing view of infrastructure for the whole island. As a result, HIRA was formed and a separate transport assessment commissioned. After 2 years, the TA was published and rejected by the full council through the Satchwell amendment, and an additional addendum was commissioned. The addendum was completed and was called into scrutiny, and further issues were raised by the board at that time. Shortly afterwards, the TA was signed off with the issues outstanding. Recent statements indicate that the addendum is flawed. During this 2.5-year period, HIRA and HI councillors were excluded from the process despite many requests. Promises were made for HIRA members to be involved at every stage and educated on the modelling process. Question: why were all community representatives excluded completely from this process twice? At the scrutiny board meeting, the only independent expert view of the TA was undertaken by Professor Nick Counsell, an internationally renowned consultant. Professor Hansel was given 2.5 minutes to deliver his findings. This report was sent to the DMC members separately. Question: why has there been no independent review and process audit of the transport assessment? Campbell Ruth are not independent. And why was the TA signed off with outstanding board issues? The TA deficiencies noted to the board remain, including the flow capacity of the A3023 bridge combination is fixed, and there are no economic options for expansion, and there is no intention to limit housing past the 1100 or the leisure traffic volumes on the island. Question: why is the HBC resisting the only analysis which could resolve these issues and support the MPPF requirements that a sustainable infrastructure is maintained for the 80-year life cycle of developments? Our recommendation for a flow capacity study is the only way to understand how many houses can be supported by this infrastructure over time and evaluate the impact on the essential requirements of all of the emergency services as well as the island's economy. All the historic data for this analysis is available now from the permanent counter at the bridge. The mitigation measures in the TA smooth intra-island flows, but make the A3023 performance worse. The assertion that this reduces the impact from severe, which is the transport assessment do nothing, to not severe is wrong. There is no definition of severe available, so there is no proof for this claim. The low-lying site at Sinah Lane requires 2 water pumping systems, one for sewage and one for surface water. The sewage system must connect to the complex island-wide pumped system as described. This whole system must be available 24/7. Blockages run at over 100 a year, and power failures, faults and breakages are frequent. The well-exercised Southern Water Backup System is a constant stream of up to 25 sewage lorries to empty any of the 15 holding tanks impacted and transport the contents to Bud's Farm. This continues until the network is restored. Unrestricted access is required for this to work. Failure results in sewage flooding and harbour pollution. This is just another reason why our essential services are given appropriate priority. The surface water Suds system is also pumped and discharges from the Suds Lake north into the ancient deep ditch network, then a marsh and Langston Harbour. We also are awaiting the SCP coastal strategy in 2022 to even know what the island is going to look like. Given this raft of outstanding infrastructure issues, it is premature to move forward with development.
Thank you, Mr. Parham. So members of the council who wish to speak are permitted 10 minutes in which to do so. So can I ask Councillor Satchwell, would you like to make your deputation, please?
Thank you, members, for this opportunity to address you. It is very strange for me to be sat on the other side of the table, so to speak, but I do not envy you this evening. This is probably one of the most complicated and highly contested applications that I've seen in my 5 years as a member of the Planning Committee. There is no question that officers have worked tirelessly to try and find a way that, in their opinion, tips the planning balance to the recommendation to grant permission that's before you tonight. Please be in no doubt that the decision you make today is a decision that affects tens, if not hundreds of thousands of borough residents and visitors. Many are already affected, either directly or indirectly, by the massive traffic queues on and off the island. For the avoidance of doubt, I'm not saying this is a daily occurrence, but when it does happen, which is regularly, people's lives are put at risk. Emergency services struggle to enter and leave the island, and that, quite frankly, is not acceptable, or more importantly, is not sustainable. I keep reminding myself it's not the local plan on trial tonight, but the Hayling Island Transport Assessment, which forms part of the emerging local plan, does inform this application. The transport assessment is just that, an assessment. It details what may be potentially possible. This is part of the problem, because the transport assessment is written as part of the local plan process, where holistic examination of the whole plan in public is intended. Following the full examination of the local plan in public in 2013, albeit pre-NPPF, the inspectors commented as follows: I concur that growth on Hayling Island should be limited, restricted to take account of flood risk. The need to minimise impacts of the natural environment of Chichester, Langstone harbours and access difficulties on the local road network at peak hours. When reviewing the officer's report, it is frustrating that it does not inform us of road flow capacity. It is a question that has been asked many times in the last 2 years, but still we have no answer. Why can we not know the answer to this important question? In addition to this, I'm not sure why officers did not want to hear from a renowned professor who to date has been given just 2.5 minutes to speak by the council. Surely, with such an important decision, we should leave no stone unturned. We need all the help we can get when seeking to understand the impact on our unique situation. Inclusivity can only help us make a robust and safe decision. You may hear that residents walked away from an opportunity for a briefing. The truth is they'd had no choice. It had been agreed that the council in the weeks before would provide a training session for the residents groups and access to data. It didn't, and so therefore, understandably, jointly, residents' representatives felt they had no choice but to not participate. Many residents have asked me, in real terms, what will be delivered to improve the road network by the developer should the application go ahead. The developer has to pay in the region of £2.4 million in total contributions. But the extensive officer's report fails to set out what will be delivered. There is nothing confirmed, therefore no timescales. There's no evidence to guarantee the possible improvements that could come forward, whether they would even make a difference. In a technical note issued on the 15th March 2020 by planners, following the controversial call-in of the unscrutinised Cabinet decision to publish the Transport Assessment Addendum, our own planners said the Hayling Island Transport Assessment concluded that with new development but without mitigation, the local plan proposals would lead to a cumulative severe impact on the road network. Why does this application not inform residents and indeed this committee what will be done and when it should be done? How can we be sure there's enough money to deliver anything meaningful that will mitigate the severe impact described by our own planners? There is nothing in conditions that offers any guarantees or requirements of the developer, the council or the highway authority to this end. The highway conditions can be found on page 114 from paragraph 3 of the officer's report. Government legislation is in favour of sustainable development unless other material considerations indicate otherwise, and here they clearly do. I would draw members' attention to R170 on page 57 of their model reasons. The proposed development would result in additional vehicles regularly entering and leaving Hayling Island, therefore interfering with the safety and free flow of traffic on the A3023 traffic route. It is therefore contrary to policy CS16, CS19, CS20 and DM13, DM14 of the Havant Borough Council Core Strategy 2011, which forms part of the Local Development Framework, Planning Policy Statement 1, Planning Policy Guidance 13. Moving on to birds and wildlife, case law and guidance has stressed the need for a full set of environmental information to be available for consideration prior to the decision being taken on whether to grant permission. There seems to be inaccuracies in the application, which suggests, for example, E26 is adjacent to the on-site refuge, when in fact it's not. Barratt Homes recently developed another site, the Oysters, which is very close by. And at the time, the site we are now reviewing this evening was identified for refuge for birds. It seems perfectly acceptable to some to keep moving these birds on when there is money to be made. There also seems to be little concern that the new area for refuge is getting smaller through coastal erosion. The RSPB is mentioned 52 times in the officer's report. Whilst the harbour is not a bathing area, more importantly, the RSPB says the application site lies within 150 metres of Langstone Harbour to the west of the designated site of special scientific interest, and forming part of the Chichester and Langston Harbour Special Protection Area and Ramsar site in recognition of its national and international importance for wildlife, including wintering waterfowl and breeding seabirds. There is no agreement in place between the developer and the RSPB, and the cost of delivering the long-term solution is in question. I would like to draw members' attention to R61 on page 50 of their model reasons. The proposal represents the undesirable addition of dwellings in an area of countryside close to a site of special scientific interest that forms part of the Chichester and Langston Harbour Special Protection Area, for which there is no overriding justification, contrary to policies CS9, CS17 of the Havant Borough Council Core Strategy 2011, which forms part of the Local Plan Development Framework, and Planning Policy Statements 1, 3 and 7. Infrastructure is a huge concern, and whilst we have covered the transport side of infrastructure to an extent, the concerns are far more widespread. The Southern Water Network regularly fails on Hayling Island, and this development would make the problems worse. This development sewage would end up going through the infamous Stoke pumping station, which has in recent years led to raw sewage ending up in people's houses, gardens and Langston Harbour. Problems with Southern Water are not limited to Stoke. Lorries manually pumping out sewers is regular and unwelcome sight. Bud's Farm, the processing site for sewage, fails regularly, and evidence of raw untreated sewage is aplenty for users of the harbour and the beaches. I recall a video of our own leader on the beach witnessing for himself the debris, for want of a better word, of one of the many releases by Southern Water. Our residents in the borough need existing issues and capacities to be fixed before we add potential additional housing that is perched just 150 metres from Langston Harbour. The flood risk assessment published in March this year raises many issues. It confirms Southern Water has rejected any future involvement with the SUDs on the site. It also shows that Langston Harbour will now be the destination for water drained from the site. In 2022, the ESCP, Hayling Island's coastal strategy, is anticipated. This strategy will be invaluable in helping to understand whether further development on Hayling is sustainable. Surely a flat island with little or no flood protection needs this to truly make an informed decision on whether development is sustainable. It needs to be considered by an inspector as part of examination on the local plan with community involvement. There are many material planning considerations that indicate why this application should be refused, and this includes prematurity. I refer members to page 51, R122. The site forms part of an area which should be developed on a comprehensive basis, and the proposals represent an undesirable form of piecemeal development likely to prejudice the potential future development of Hayling Island. As I draw to a close, I would briefly like to turn to case law and guide people to Stringer versus the Minister of Housing. We must not lose the opportunity for development on Hayling Island that is sustainable and truly in keeping with its surroundings, or one that has integrity at its heart and factors in the long-term well-being of current and potential residents that may occupy it.
Thank you, Councillor Satchwell. Can I please ask Councillor Hughes, would you like to make your deputation now, please? Yes, I can hear you.
I just want to see if you can see me. It's not important, as long as you can hear me. Members, good evening. Thank you very much for allowing me this opportunity to speak with you this evening. You will have read the officer's report recommending approval of this plan application. I also have read the report and spent many hours on the planning portal reading the objections. They primarily focus on traffic, access to local services and schools, and the threat of potential pollutions in Langston Harbour. You may wonder why I'm given this deputation, but I've been involved in Hayling Island now for over 2.5 years since I took on my cabinet role. Been heavily involved in the pollution efforts, erosion at West Beach, and also I'm now the chairman of the Hayling Island Infrastructure Advisory Group. Firstly and most strongly, I believe we have a moral obligation to build houses to meet our housing need, not just for our young people, but for everybody. It is worth pointing out today, and I know I've said this before, but it's really important. We have twice as many bedrooms in our borough today than we need in 2037. However, those bedrooms are in larger houses of 3+ bedrooms, often on very large plots, frequently occupied by individuals and couples who have spare rooms. We can't force those individuals to downsize to smaller properties, thereby freeing up their property for greater occupancy. By facilitating the building of mixed properties, flats, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, our greatest need, 3 bedroom properties, etc., we will create flexibility in the offerings across the borough and hopefully enable people to occupy their own home in a location of their choice. Now, the Hayling Island Transport Assessment Addendum is a detailed piece of work. And as an impartial observer, I wasn't involved in its generation, its analysis, conclusions and recommendations. I'm not in a position to critique the content per se. I would, however, make the following observation. An assessment is just that, an assessment. It's based on limited real-time analysis, modelled and extrapolated over time. I want to cite the MDA, the West of Waterlooville Major Development Area. And people may say, what's the relevance to this? But it's really relevant. The traffic planning appendix for the major development area of the West of Waterlooville, delivered in 2010, comprised over 1,000 pages. It's 10 times larger than the Hayling Island traffic addendum. 17 junctions were subjected to real-time analysis over a 3-day period during the summer of 2009. And from that data and additional modelling, detailed traffic assessments forecasting the expected increase in traffic were extrapolated out to the year 2021. A series of triggers based on the number of housing completions was set out in the Section 106 agreement, requiring modifications to those 17 junctions to accommodate the increased traffic. What has become apparently clear, however, is that the modelling, when compared to actual traffic, was inaccurate. So much so that there's been significant engagement with Hampshire Highways and the development company to get the completion figures increased before the triggers have been initiated. Additionally, and critically, the local residents association have been involved in influencing the sequencing of the works at specific junctions, thereby using their local knowledge and insight into assist highway planners in making adjustments to the local roads network that are timely, appropriate and strategic. And as I've mentioned already, I have taken on the chair of the Hayling Island Infrastructure Advisory Group, and in my introductory communication with the civilian representatives, I propose the above approach as a role for the group, making use of their local expertise and knowledge to shape the infrastructure adjustments. Bearing in mind, of course, that the modelling to develop the Hayling Island Transport Assessment Addendum was based on 2 timelines, today and 2036, very similar in approach to the MDA modelling work. The addendum highlights a series of interventions, package M1A, that could ameliorate the friction and shockwave events that occur on the A3023. In respect to the development of Sinah Lane, developers' contributions in the form of Section 106 payments, approximately 680,000, and community infrastructure levy receipts of approximately 1.7 million could fund these works. And I take on board what Councillor Satchwell said, there's no agreement in place to ring fence those funds for these purposes. Work in progress potentially. One of the criticisms of the traffic assessment addendum is that it did not take into consideration real-time traffic during peak summer months and at weekends. This summer has seen record numbers of visitors to the island. It's been described by some locals as the busiest for 30 years. There are 3 permanent traffic counters on Hayling Island, one on Langston Bridge, one at Mill Rive, just outside the schools, and another at West Lane, south of Brights Lane. And I have seen the raw data from a 10-day period between the 1st and 10th of August. That data covers vehicle type, volume in terms of numbers, speed, including mean speed, for each hour and for a 24-hour total. The raw data shows that traffic flows for the whole 10-day period were very good. As you would expect, average speeds were slow during high volume periods compared to low volume periods. Now I'm sure there will be many accusations of what does he know? He doesn't live here. In my cabinet role, I've been making regular trips to Hayling Island, particularly West Beach, since 2018. It has become my norm since May of this year to note the time to and from the junction with the A27. And the time for each journey in either direction has always been between 11 and 14 minutes, including yesterday when I went down to Bound Lane and I came back and encountered temporary traffic lights. Now, many of the comments relate to the potential of the increase in pollution into Langstone Harbour as a result of this development. Did you know that Langstone Harbour is not a European designated bathing water? That locals have commented that it is cleaner now than it's ever been? And did you know that before the year 2000, all Portsmouth sewage was pumped straight out into the Long Sea outfall untreated? Despite that, Hayling Beach has been awarded the blue flag status for the past consecutive 29 years and has had excellent bathing water. Did you know that even excellent bathing water can have up to 825 poo bugs per 330 millilitres, the size of the average Coca-Cola tin? Now, other brands are acceptable. That the treated water pumped into Langstone Harbour from southern water is cleaner than the water is going into. Did you know that only 3% of household waste contains solid matter? The vast majority of water is toilet flushing, kitchens and bathrooms. And during stormwater releases, that the percentage of solid matter would be less than 0.1%, but is in fact screened to remove that solid matter before discharge. The Buzz Farm and the Thornham Wastewater Treatment Works receive a combined total of 800 kilograms of nitrogen loaded each day, of which only 130 kilograms is released in the final effluent. This is 21% below the maximum permitted. And we should not forget the two greatest causes of nitrogen in both harbours is surface water runoff and from the marine environment. It comes in on the tide. Sustainable development has three pillars: social, economic and environmental. I do believe that this development meets all three pillars. Who are we to say people cannot live in their own home? The environmental challenges can be addressed, and I do see a role for an upgraded flood-resistant, fully available Hayling Billy Trail. And finally, at the macro level, economic growth through house building investment will enable Hayling Island to evolve to meet the demands of locals and visitors alike. And I hope you support the recommendation before you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. That concludes the public deputations. Do the officers have any comments to make on the deputations and comments received today?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I would like to pick up on some matters raised by the deputations in respect to the detailed points on ecology, drainage and nutrients, and to point out to members that all of these have been scrutinised by the statutory consultees. In fact, as evidenced in the consultee responses in the report, this has resulted in a series of changes and clarification to address their concerns. And we are now at the position where the consultees, including the ecologist, the lead local flood authority, the Environment Agency and Natural England, all are satisfied with the proposal. In respect to the RSPD, they have been actively engaged with the developer, negotiating for the land to be transferred to them, and indeed there is a draft transfer which is being reviewed by them with a view to concluding that aspect of the proposal. Should the scheme get planning permission, or should members be resolved to grant planning permission, it would be subject to a legal agreement in respect to the bird refuse. In addition, in respect to the nitrate situation, as with all new houses, there is a condition which limits the water uses of properties in respect to sewage. So in terms of the larger, more comprehensive fundamental matters in respect to the local plan situation and highways, I would ask Mr. Hayward if he would like to comment on these, please.
Yes, I was just going to comment, Chair, just to remind members that obviously this is a DMC meeting in relation to this specific application rather than an examination of the local plan, which obviously took place on the 30th of January 2019, with the changes also being considered on the 9th of September this year. In relation to the specific points brought up by Mrs. Hayward, I would obviously highlight that the Hayling Island Transport Assessment Addendum was obviously and the Hayling Island Transport Assessment generally was sometime in development. It is ultimately approved and published by the Borough Council. There was certainly a more unusual route to its approval ultimately, for sure, but it does represent an approved assessment by the council. This was also commented on through the application by the Highways Authority, which commented that on the basis that the Borough Council is satisfied with the findings of the Hayling Island Transport Assessment Addendum, that it considered the mitigation suitable. And I would also obviously, as Mrs. Hayward highlighted, remind the councillors that this does represent a site in the emerging local plan, and it is also a site that is necessary in order to maintain our 5-year housing land supply. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hayward. Do we have any further comments from officers? No, I see none. Members, we have heard and read all the public deputations, and before we move to questions, I should like to momentarily adjourn the meeting to allow for a 5-minute comfort break before we proceed. I should like to remind members that the broadcast will still be live during the adjournment, and so please can you keep your microphones muted until the meeting recommences. Thank you, members. Just one more thing. It's just after 10 to, so if we can recommence just after 5 to 7. Thank you.
I can't do anything until I get this recording right.
Councillor Schimbart, I believe
Yes,
it
I'm
has
here.
been 5 minutes. If we
Yes,
could just
it
double
has.
check that on the whole committee have returned,
Right.
we should be okay to carry on. So just really quickly, Councillor Howard, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Holly.
Thank you. Councillor Keast? Thank you. Councillor Quellen?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Councillor Lloyd?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Councillor Guest?
Yes, I'm here.
And Councillor Lowe?
Yes, I'm here.
So that
Wonderful,
is the
thank you.
committee. Good.
Yeah,
Thank you,
lovely,
Holly.
thank you.
Thank you. Members, before the adjournment, we heard from deputies and officers concerning this application. I shall now ask each member of the committee in turn whether they have any questions to ask the officers. After each question, I shall ask the officers to respond before moving on to the next question. When a member has finished the questions, could they please mute the microphone, and I shall then ask the next member in alphabetical order. So, first of all, Councillor Crellin, do you have any questions for the officers?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I've got about 3, but do you want me to do one at a time?
No, I think you can just state all 3, and I'm sure.
Okay, thank you. Flood levels, they've been mentioned a few times by officers and also by obviously some of the objectors and the deputies. I see there's a discrepancy where our officers are saying that it's level 1, the flood level, and in fact a deputy has written that it's flood level 3, so I'd like to find out which it is. Also, there's a mention of a timescale planned between the developments, the phased building. Do they have a planned timescale? And also agricultural land. I think Daphne said that it was 3A. Can she explain what that means to me? And also, on one of the objectors, he says that what is missing here is a holistic approach, concentrating on just one development with over 10,000 homes planned. Well, I don't think there's 10,000 homes planned actually for Hayling. Could we have some sort of indication from officers that maybe this is a misprint or someone's got the wrong idea? Thank you, Chairman. That'll do for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I ask the officers to respond, please? Hello?
I'm sorry, Chairman. Hopefully you can hear me. Mrs. Hayward is just having a bit of trouble unmuting her microphone.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. I'm not sure. We got a technical hitch at this end where Daphne's unfortunately not able to unmute at the moment. Can you bear with us just a minute?
Yes, certainly.
In the meantime, I can perhaps answer the question around the amount of development proposed.
Yes, please.
Obviously, the application before you is as before you. In terms of the local plan, there is a little over 1,000 homes proposed for Hayling Island. Without obviously looking to put words in anybody's mouth, the 10,000 may be a reference to borough-wide figures.
Thank you.
In order to, oh, she's back.
Good.
Yeah, sorry about that. Right, I can now come off mute. Right, so the first question in respect to the levels, the proposed housing development is on grade 1, level 1, which is the area at lowest risk. The area or part of the area adjoining the bird refuge would fall in the higher risk area of risk, and as do some of the roads on and off the island, which are also fall within the grades 2 and 3. The time for building, the developer is proposing a phased development. He hasn't provided any specific timescales, but he is looking probably in the region of a 5-year period. I think David has answered about the agricultural land. So that's, if there was a fourth question, could you just repeat that, please?
Yes, we've heard about the homes, the amount of homes, the flood risk level, and I think that was it. And the timing between the phase developments.
All right, so are you happy with that?
The agricultural land was 3A. What does that indicate? What does that mean? Did you hear that?
Yes, I did. David, do you think you could answer that one, please?
I was just going to offer. A classification of 3A would mean that that is best and most versatile agricultural land. So it is a higher grade of agricultural land. The gradings go sort of 1 is the best, so to speak. So it's not absolutely the best, but it is best and most versatile agricultural land.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hayward. Right, come on to Councillor Guest. Do you have any questions for the officers, please?
I do not, Madam Chairman.
Right, thank you. Councillor Howard, do you have any questions?
Not at the moment, thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Keast, do you have any
Yes,
questions?
please, Madam Chairman. The matter of beach huts, erosion and shingle loss was raised by one of the deputies. Is that any consideration to this application, or is it not, please? That's the first question. The second one was in Rosie Law's presentation, she gave the impression that the land that this was being built on was land which was going to be a loss to local wildlife habitat. It's my understanding that this land which is being built on was actually cultivated land, and it's only the last year that it's been left fallow. Is that correct, please? Hello?
Hello?
Madam Chairman, if I can respond. Okay, in terms of the beach huts and the erosion, the only part of the site that actually abuts the coast is the area for the bird refuge. The RSP have been asked to comment on concerns raised by residents about erosion of that area. They are aware of it, and they do not have any concerns. They're satisfied that the bird refuge will provide the mitigation required for the loss of supporting habitat. And indeed, this leads on to the second question in terms of the fact that the site has been cultivated, although the way it was cultivated is that it would be done in a way that would, when winter crop was grown there, it would provide for the overwintering birds. The loss of some of this area, which was not on a continuous basis, has been assessed against the benefits of providing a permanent winter bird refuge, and that's something that Natural England and the RSPB have been actively engaged in and support the proposal in that respect. And as I said, there is active negotiations to transfer the land to the RSPB, including finances for the ongoing future maintenance of the land. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Keast, are you quite happy with that? Councillor Keast?
Yes, sorry, Chairman. I'm sorry, I thought you said Councillor Hughes. I beg your pardon. Yes.
Are you quite happy with that?
I mean, in that case, then Rosie Law is partially right in as far as there was provision made there for overwintering, which I had the impression that it wasn't. So that's why I've raised the issue. There was one other item I would like to just mention, was the RSPB, and it was raised by one of the early deputies, was that it seems a little bit strange that we approved the actual application before any arrangement has been made with RSPB for protection of the land. And if they decide not to take it, where do we stand if they decide not to adopt it?
Thank you, Chairman. If they decide to not adopt it, because the matter would be in the legal agreement requiring provision of that bird refuge, it would be in management responsibility for another party. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Lloyd, do you have questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I do. And unfortunately, I've got so many papers here and I've made so many notes. I may speak slowly, if that's all right, to get my questions in order. If we stick with the bird refuge that Councillor Keast has just mentioned, and that statement on page 15 and also page 17 of the report, I'm concerned that this is still subject to a legal agreement with the RSPB, and there is the comment that says as long as a legal agreement is secured. So I mean, at this point in time, not only is the land for the birds partially in flood zone 3, there's no legal agreement, and I presume there won't be until and unless the application is approved. So that's a bit out on a limb that there'd be some other management agency. So should there be a more strongly worded condition to secure that habitat for the birds? That's my question on that. Also, I noticed something in the paperwork that refers to the informal footpaths across the fields that will cause disruption to the overwintering birds, and I've seen them on the photographic page 129. Do we have a condition to say that those footpaths will be closed off? That's my second question on there. And just generally, I'm just wondering whether this bird refuge is actually sustainable in the long term. But there's those two questions. Do you want me to go on with my other questions, or should we have an answer to those and come back to other topics, Madam Chair? Which would you?
Perhaps we'll have an answer for these and then come back if you have any further questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In respect to the bird refuge, negotiations are well advanced with the RSPB. Sorry, let me repeat that. In association with the bird refuge, negotiations are well in advance with the RSPB. I have been copied into the transfer document and the land to which that would apply. And I've also discussed the matter with the RSP directly. Having said that, you know, there are occasions when the bird refuge is actually taken over by other bodies, which I understand has happened in more recent cases. So provided the bird refuge is provided and properly managed, which would be completely covered by the legal agreement, then that matter would be secured. In terms of the footpath, if the use of informal paths was interfering with the mitigation provided by the bird refuge, then the company or the responsibility would lie with the RSP or the appropriate body that would be managing the bird refuge to make sure that those footpaths are closed off. Sorry, could you just repeat your third question, please?
No, that was it.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Further questions, Councillor?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Okay, if we could move, leading on from that, assuming that we do get the refuge, I would personally like to see a condition about those footpaths, because you're just waiting for the intrusion to the birds, if we get it, if they're there, if they come. that to be a problem. But then we get on to the management of the site, which would be great for the birds, and I'd like that. But of course, nutrients would be going really directly into the harbour from managing the land such that there was enough food on it for the birds. So in that case, is there any fee to be paid by anybody in terms of creating nutrients? I note that the developer doesn't have to pay a fee in terms of nutrient neutrality on the basis that building the houses on this field is considered better than having the field producing food because of using fertilisers and pesticides. So would there be any fee to be paid to mitigate the management of the refuge for the birds, which will cause nutrients to go into the harbour? Should we deal with that one?
Yes, Chairman. There has been an appropriate assessment, an HIR, Habitats Regulation Assessment, done as part of the application, which was for the whole of the development. The early discussions in respect to the site with Natural England did look at how the bird refuge would be managed. The assessment that the council has done has gone to Natural England, and they're satisfied with it, having looked at the overall scheme. Thank you.
Thank you.
However, David Hayward may be able to add that.
I was just going to say, in undertaking that HRA, obviously water quality has been an aspect of that assessment, and as you say, Councillor Lloyd, there would be effectively a net benefit due to the decommissioning of the agricultural use of the site. In terms of the calculations that go into Natural England's methodology, when there is a bird refuge or open space, it is not assumed that the nutrient input onto the site will be zero. It's actually 5 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare per year. So that does account for an element of sort of ongoing nutrient input onto the site. So that is effectively within Natural England's methodology anyway.
Is that okay, Councillor?
Yeah, that's great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to the provision for school. I see that the developer would have to make a contribution of some £872,000, which I presume would be to extend the primary schools that the children of the housing estate would go to. If you could just confirm my understanding if that's correct. And what I would say is, can the schools actually accommodate the extra children, even with that money? Does the sum take into account the extra space required due to COVID-19 restrictions? And so is that, if not, is that sustainable going forward? And I also note that there's a question on page 28 regarding a crossing which is deemed needed on the walk to school route, and should there be a condition securing that? I couldn't see one.
Thank you, Councillor. Right, in terms of the school provision, yes, the contribution would go to the primary school. In terms of the accommodating the extra children, prior to the COVID situation, it was estimated that that would allow for the school to be expanded to accommodate the extra children. COVID has made quite an impact on our lives, but going forward, the council, the government is looking, and the scientists and the doctors are looking to be able to address it. So this proposal hasn't been designed to take account of COVID. In terms of the crossing on the walk to school route, there is a requirement for a contribution to fund that, and those works would of 35,000, and those works would be carried out by the County Council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor, was that the last of your questions?
No, it wasn't, Madam Chair. But do you want to move on to somebody else?
I just asked Councillor Lowe, do you have any questions?
No, I do not, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Lloyd, if you'd like to carry on with the questions.
Thank you. Yeah. On page 32, I wonder if you could explain your concerns regarding the SUDS features and the maintenance of schedule for that. I noticed it was in the papers I received from the site view, and I just do not feel very comfortable with this. What assurance do we have that when it rains really heavily, like October the 3rd, I heard was the most daily rainfall in this country since records began, which may, like a lot of the modelling we've seen recently regarding rainfall and so on and so forth, you know, the modelling may not be accurate when we're seeing rain like that. So what assurance is there that when it rains really hard and for a long time, as it seems to be doing, our climate is changing, that the system that's going in, given the underground water is not that far below the surface and tidal lock, that the system of the tanks and then the pump to pump the excess water out into the harbour directly, that is all going to work. I just have these terrible memories of being in a resident's back garden with effluent on my shoes, when a pump from Southern Water, and I know we're not talking the same sort of pump, well, at least I hope we're not, had failed, and it was reliant on ditches. And this mentions ditches which are down to the landowner to maintain. And it was because of that non-maintenance of ditches that caused this sewage problem. I just have these terrible worries that with this water in this low-lying area causing flooding, and that this SUDS arrangement may not be up to the job. Can you, would you mind going through that again for me?
Right, thank you, Chair. The drainage on the site is complicated, and in actual fact, the details have been the subject of a very high level of negotiation between the relevant statutory bodies to get to a stage where they are satisfied with the details at both the Lead Local Flood Authority and the Environment Agency. They have checked the detailed submissions, and I would refer you to the update paper, which also talks about the 100 plus 40% climate change storm provision, and that also the design has also been designed to take account of storms as well, a 1 in 200 year tidal event as well. So, not being an expert on drainage, I can only be guided by what the statutory consultees have commented. But as I say, they have required a substantial amount of additional work and submission to get to that level where they withdraw their initial objection.
Thank you. Yes, I'm reading that, and I'm reading this should prevent uncontrolled flows entering the watercourse, and as a result there should be an overall improvement in the quality of any surface water runoff. Yeah, okay.
You mentioned also the maintenance of the ditch and who would maintain that. That is a watercourse. It would need to be maintained by the landowner, and if it is not maintained, then the Environment Agency have the enforcing powers.
That does sound very reminiscent of sewage, Hayling Island, Stoke Pump, Southern Water and the Environment Agency. So I am nervous about that, I have to say, on this low-lying land. Okay, but thank you for going through it again. Yeah, I just have one more question about the trees, because, and I'm sorry, Madam Chair, but reading the report and then getting to conditions and then having supplementary documents, I haven't been able to quite catch up on what's been resolved and what hasn't, but I'm sure you can tell me, Mrs. Hayward. So on page 11, it talked about the layout protecting T31 to 35, and that on page 78 it says the arboriculturist was not convinced the relationship between the retained mature trees and the buildings is sustainable. So can you confirm that in condition 7 on page 112, the actions needed to protect the mature trees which the arboriculturist is concerned about will be mandatory, as he suggests? And could that be stated in the condition, or have I missed a step in between that has already done that? Forgive me if I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The condition that is being referred to requires protective measures to be provided before work starts on site, and that those should be kept in place. So that is a compliance condition, and if the developer did not comply with that condition, the council has powers to enforce it. The only thing that you might add to make that condition, to strengthen that condition, perhaps would be to require that there should be a pre-commencement meeting between the council's arborist and their consultant to agree that the protective fencing has been appropriately provided. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So I will repeat the process in order to allow any additional questions that the committee may have thought of. First of all, Councillor Crellin.
No, thank you, Chairman. Not at this moment. Thank you.
Councillor Guest.
No, thank you, Madam Chairman.
Councillor Howard.
No, thank you, Madam Chairman.
Councillor Keast.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. One of the deputies raised the issue of how was it that we could agree or possibly agree the construction of the houses without having the infrastructure changes made. The answer, I think, is probably quite simple. I think I can answer this, and I hope somebody will agree with me on this. We haven't got the money. We need the money from the developer in order to do the changes to the infrastructure. I think I have got that right. The other thing I wanted to just mention was the vegetation, which is currently exists as almost as a barrier between the field and the houses in North Shore Road. Will that stay and be enhanced so that there is a barrier between that and the new estate, please?
Thank you. I'll ask the officers to respond, please.
Thank you, Chairman. The vegetation is in the main in the properties, in the curtilages of the existing properties. So the developer is not looking to remove that. What would happen is that fencing would go up between the boundary and proposed development. In terms of the boundaries along North Sheer Road, there's no intention to provide any additional landscaping, although there is intention to provide additional landscaping along the boundary with the Hayling Village. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. And are there any comments on Councillor Keith's first comments?
That's regarding the upgrading of the infrastructure.
Oh, right. Yes, that is my understanding as well, but I don't know whether David Hayward would like to comment on that as well.
I mean, ultimately, Councillor Keast, you have described the planning system in the UK. Yes, that is correct. Should the council wish to, through its decisions regarding the community infrastructure levy, it could choose to advance implementation of some of the measures in the Hayling Island transport assessment prior to development. That would be a separate decision of the council in due course.
I do have one other question, please, Madam Chairman.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. A matter called tidal lock was mentioned, and having lived on Hayling Island, I'm very aware that when the tide is in, the water does not drain away in people's gardens and in various other places on the island. Is allowance being made for this, because this could cause considerable problems until the tide goes out?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, allowance has been made in the design of the drainage system to make sure that the water is held back in the attenuation basin until it can be discharged into the harbour. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Like Councillor Lloyd, do you have any further questions?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I want to move on to car parking spaces. There are 26 garages, I'm told. So I wonder if we really oughtn't take that number out of the car park spaces, because behaviour shows us people do not use them for their cars. So if we do that, there'd be a shortfall of 41. Now on page 77 and 78, even with the garages, and even with the fact that the on-site parking lots are tandem, Miss Hayward told me yesterday, for which I'm grateful, not parallel. So we know that people have an aversion to parking one car behind the other. And so one goes on and one goes on the pavement. But notwithstanding that behaviour, on page 77 and 78, it says, car parking provision is insufficient, causing undesirable effect on the development's roads. And £5,000, or it then goes on to say that £5,000 already been calculated as being needed for a TRO on surrounding streets, which will inevitably encounter overspill on road parking, contrary to our SPD of 2016. Now, with that in mind, does this car parking provision make for a sustainable development?
If I may, Chairman,
Yes.
right, in respect to the garages and the fact that we have the tandem parking in front, that relates to 26 plots. That's about 13% of the units on the site. Garages are counted as a parking space within our parking guidance, our adopted parking guidance, provided they satisfy a certain size, and these ones do satisfy that size. So we would have no reason to justify not counting them as towards the parking provision. In respect to the requirement for a traffic regulation order, this is a concern expressed by the parking team, that if people did start parking in Sinah Lane and nearby roads, it could result in a hazard and congestion, and hence the possible need for a traffic regulation order. This is quite common in terms of a new housing development, to make sure that there is that provision in the legal agreement, should that be the case. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hayward. As I say, it was my own calculations about the tandem parking garages. The comment was without that, including the garages and all the tandem parking. Okay, I have just another question on cycle provision on page 77. I wondered if you could clarify this paragraph and how it relates to the proposed TRO. And my question would be as well, as we move towards zero emissions from traffic, and much is made in this application of the close proximity to the Hayling Billy trail cycling, is there provision for storage of cycles? Is it adequate? Is it in the right place such that people will use it? I found on page 77 it was telling me there wasn't provision, but have I got that wrong? Hello.
All right. Thank you, Chairman. Councillor, could you please clarify, my page numbering I think is different to yours, as to under which section? Is that one of the representations or the consultee responses, please?
Right, if you just bear with me a second, I'll turn it up again. Okay.
Traffic management team.
Yeah, traffic management team, initial comments. There appears to be listed insufficient cycle parking. Traffic assessment says 195 spaces when there should be 2 spaces for a number of properties. No visitor cycle parking shown on the plans. And and I wondered whether this is a mix of the paragraph about cycles store and parking spaces. Just wondering whether it's a typo. I didn't quite understand it. Because it talks about 5k being set aside to implement a TRO on the surrounding streets, but it begins with insufficient cycle parking.
Chairman, those were the initial comments of the traffic team. Since then, the plans have been amended such that each of the detached properties would have storage provision for cycles, either in a shed or within a garage. So that has been complied with. And also, since the original comments in respect to parking, the layout has been altered to provide parking in accordance with our adopted standards. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Lloyd. Lastly, Councillor Lowe, do you have any questions? Councillor Lowe?
I believe she just momentarily dropped out of the call, but I've managed to get her back in now, Chairman.
Right. Councillor Lowe, are you there?
I'm here, yeah.
Do you have any questions? Hello?
Hello?
Hello. Do you have any questions?
No, I don't.
Right, thank you. Right, now we will proceed to the debate. I shall now ask each member of the committee in turn to make a contribution to the debate. If a member wishes to contribute to the debate later in the discussion, they need only to ask, and I shall ask the next member. I shall repeat the process in order to allow for all debate to be heard. Could I please ask the members to propose motions or amendments during the debate and not wait until the end? This will make the proceedings more understandable to everyone listening. As soon as a motion or amendment has been proposed, I shall ask for a seconder. I would remind members that as soon as a motion has been proposed and seconded, the debate should only relate to this motion. I would remind the members that if they are minded to refuse an application, contrary to officer advice, they must clearly state their reasons for refusal. If a member wishes to add conditions not recommended by the officers, he or she must give reasons for this condition. These reasons will be noted by the officers. So can I start, Councillor Crellin?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, indeed, this is a massive development, obviously, and it's caused me some sleepless nights, I might tell you, because at the moment I'm finely balanced between yes and no. It's very difficult. I mean, there's a lot of emotion. I understand that, especially if people are living on Hayling. I totally understand that. And I also understand Councillor Hughes when he says, you know, that he's found out and he's sort of run sort of tests, if you like, on the transport situation. Our officers, I realise, have worked extremely hard. I mean, because of obviously the time it took to get to us. I mean, it's taken me a whole week to read the paperwork, let alone anything else. At the moment, I'm really sort of undecided, and I would prefer to listen to any other debate which will help me sort of come to a conclusion at this moment. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Crellin. Can I go on to David, Councillor Guest, please?
Yes, Madam Chairman. Well, as many members listening know, I've been responsible for planning on the council for many, many years. And over the total 20 years I've served on this council, we've had many contentious planning applications. In every case where we have given the necessary consent for these developments to take place, issues arising have been resolved. And I don't believe, other than the parking question, i.e. people always believe there's never enough parking. However, we follow the county guidelines and we have a policy on how much parking we provide. This is always the situation that remains the thorn in most people's side. However, as I've said, many, many hundreds of houses have been built throughout the borough. Many of them have been contentious applications, but the issues that arise through public consultation have been resolved by our skillful officers, who are the professionals that we employ as a council to give us their best advice and to guide us to make sure that we make sensible decisions. And I think in this particular case on Hayling Island, and as I said, I've lived in this area since I was a young teenager, and I loved Hayling Island. I spent a lot of time there as a boy and now as a man with my family, and I love it. I would not want to see anything take place that was likely to damage the environment there, because I realise how sensitive it is to those who live on the island. However, we are obliged by central government to provide housing. If we don't provide housing, then central government will do it for us. They will step in and we will have no choice as to where housing goes, as long as any site that's chosen by a developer is deemed to be sustainable under the national planning guidance. Now, the officers assure me that this site is deemed to be sustainable, although I hear many questions from the public saying that various issues arising are not necessarily in their eyes sustainable. So there's a dichotomy of opinion, as always, but as these things have to be resolved, and our obligation to central government, of which we are part, is to provide for housing for those that need it in our borough, we have to go ahead. Therefore, I have no hesitation in proposing the approval of this application.
Thank you, Councillor Guest. Can I move on to Councillor Howard, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I kind of echo some of what Councillor Crellin has said. It is difficult, it is very emotive. We do need to provide housing, and as Councillor Hughes said in his deputation, you know, we do have that duty to do that. And as I've said before, all our developments at some point in the past were open fields and land. I'm more concerned around the school provision. I mean, hopefully this COVID thing will be gone at some point over the next sort of year, 18 months, and the schools can get back to normal. I am really torn. And I would like to hear what other people have to say. So at this moment in time, I can't actually make a decision.
Fair enough. Thank you, Councillor. Can I go on to Councillor Keast, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Guest is quite right. If we don't have a plan and we don't have an allocation of housing, then all the land in the borough is up for grabs. Developers will just come in and the government will allocate it. We wouldn't even have a say if we did it in that manner. And it's not. It has happened. It's happened very close to home. It happened in East Hants, where East Hants didn't have their act together, and a developer came in and said, I wanted to develop that piece of land. It wasn't suitable as far as the council was concerned, but the government inspector permitted it. So we have to be very, very careful about what we wish for, because sometimes it can be quite serious. I'm very pleased to see, this is a very minor point, but I'm very, very pleased to see that on this application and the affordable housing, there are actually 2 4-bedroom properties. If you know the housing list like I do, the most difficult property to get hold of for a family is a 4-bedroom one. The list of people waiting for it is not very long, but they have to wait about 8 years, by which time half the family's grown up. So I'm really pleased to see there is a couple of 4-bedded properties on there. Regarding the highway, it's a real dilemma for us as councillors, because we've had 2 reports. Neither of the reports have said that the highway is at capacity. They've simply come up with suggestions or ideas where they could increase the flow. I have to be honest with you, I wrote to the leader of the council, having read that report, and I said to him, you and I could have driven down the Havant Road to Hayling Seafront and picked out these points ourselves. Why did we pay so much money for a survey? That's my opinion. But however, having said that, I do believe that these improvements, when they are made, will help the flow. Like Councillor Guest, I've lived on Hayling Island for many years of my life. I love Hayling Island to bits. I wouldn't do anything detrimental to it that if I thought it in any way would be detrimental. And it is a dilemma on this particular application. But on the balance of things, I'm going to support him, and I'm going to propose as on the order papers and second Councillor Guest.
Thank you very much, Councillor Keast. So we have a proposer by Councillor Guest as on the order paper to support the application, seconded by Councillor Keast. So now we will just debate on this motion. First of all, can I please ask Councillor Guest for your wording on the motion? I'm not sure if that is necessary. Can I ask Ms. Weaver, is that necessary if it's proposing as on the order paper or not?
As it's on the order paper with no current conditions attached, we'll go as it is and we'll just start debating.
Yeah. Okay then. Right, so we'll carry on debating. Can I next ask Councillor Lloyd, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I've got so many concerns about this application, about its sustainability because of where the land is. It is only 150 metres away from a SSSI. There is the great potential for flooding of the bird refuge, and then with this SUD system, and given how much water that land has been absorbing or being allowed to evaporate from it, I do worry that there'll be flooding there. I'm not sure this is sustainable from an environmental point of view or from a social point of view. I don't believe, as this sits, it meets those two pillars of the three that make up a sustainable development. So at the moment, I'm afraid I'm erring towards making a motion to refuse on several reasons. Do you want me to give them, or do you want to go to other members?
I think I'll go to the other members first, please. So, Councillor Lowe, do you have anything you wish to contribute to the debate?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm a bit like Councillor Cllr and Councillor Howard myself. There's, I can see, yes, we need the housing, but there are other concerns there as well. So, if it's okay, I'd like to continue listening to the debate and see if it'll help me come to a decision.
Can I ask, do the officers have any comments to make based on the debate so far?
Thank you, Chair. I don't have any comments to make. I don't know whether my colleagues do.
Well, then I will go back to Councillor Cllr.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Basically, I think at the end of the day, we have to believe our professionals. If we're going to disbelieve or not be very happy what our professionals are telling us, then why are we bothering? We have to put our trust in somebody. We are the planning committee. We need to make decisions. I'm aware of that. Not often it's very good decisions. Unfortunately, we don't like making decisions, but we have to. And at the end of the day, I feel that now I'm erring on the side of permit. But that's all I have to say at the moment. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. And Councillor Howard, do you have anything to add?
No, I am still very torn. I don't know. I can understand where everybody is coming from. I don't know, actually, Madam Chair. I think, can you maybe possibly come back to me when we get to the vote?
I don't know. I'm sorry?
Hello? I was going to say, I really, at this moment in time, I really just can't, I don't know. So that's my honest. Because we're not voting, are we, at the moment? So I don't know. I'm still thinking, no.
Right. Councillor Guest, do you have anything further to add?
Yes, I do, Madam Chairman. Just on the comment that was made, we are elected to make decisions. That's our job. If you don't want to make decisions, you do not become a councillor. It is part of the job that you are given by the public who elect you. You have to make decisions, and sometimes those decisions are very uncomfortable decisions. In this case, on this planning application, there are a number of advantages listed in the papers for which comment was made, well over £2 million being pumped into the local infrastructure by way of schools, etc., and road improvements that will be lost if this decision is made by the Secretary of State. If it goes to appeal and the Secretary of State grants permission, which is probable given the officer's recommendation, then we will lose all our ability to negotiate and implement section, as it used to be, the planning order of these advantages. We will lose them, and the Secretary of State will determine what we get and what we don't get. Then we lose control. And if we don't make decisions that align with our policy and the local plan as set out, then we are in grave danger of being done unto. And I don't want us to get in that position. I want us to reason through every issue and come to reasonable and sensible conclusions. If the development is wrong, the officers should advise us of that fact, if that is the case. Now, I believe with the amount of work that's been done on this site, that the officers have made a reasonable recommendation to us to approve. That is the guidance we get as councillors. We are not professional planners, we are not builders, and we're not designers. This is what we do. Now, if we don't follow that advice, members, I'm surely telling you now that the Secretary of State will make the decision, as this application is already at appeal and pending. And if we refuse it tonight, it will go to appeal, and I think there's every chance that it will be determined favourably by the Secretary of State, and we will lose all advantage we might get in the Section 106 agreement, providing the money for the schools and the road improvements. Beware, be careful, and I urge you to vote for this application.
Can I ask Councillor Keys, do you have anything further to add? I realise you have seconded.
No, I think Councillor Guest has said all that really needs to be said on this, I think. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Councillor. So it has been proposed by Councillor Guest.
Can I have a bit of a debate, Madam Chair?
Yes, Councillor Lloyd.
Thank you. Yeah, we are here to represent the residents of the borough, and we have been making, some of us have been sat on this committee making those difficult decisions for quite a while, so we're not averse to that. I think we're hesitant about this particular application. In common sense tells me that any application that ends up with 26 conditions, with still perhaps more to be firmed up, does have something wrong with it. I think it's because it's where it is. It is so close to the harbour. There are problems with flooding. There are problems with permeation of water from underground. We cannot guarantee the modelling about rainfall, climate change. People who live in Fish Lake or something, Hebden Bridge last year will tell you that. And I know it's all in here from the modelling, the 1 in 100 years, the storm surge, the this, the that, but we've seen it regularly. The modelling doesn't match reality. And I would be very loath to approve a nice application. The housing, the 58 affordable housing is very attractive. The layout is attractive, but it's where it is. And with its associated unsustainable problems. It would be nice to have the money for the infrastructure, the roads. There's no guarantee that money, the 679,000, will be used on those friction alleviations. There's no money in the country anyway, so whether any money we would get from this development would end up dealing with anything substantial on Hayling, it is debatable anyway. I just think on the sustainability elements of this development, because of where it is, we need to be very careful. I hear what Councillor Guest is saying, we hear it all the time, but we are here as representatives of residents, present and future, and I would not want to put my name to something that is destined to be unsustainable from day one. And I know officers have worked very hard on this. It's, as Councillor Crellin says, it's taken a long time to come to us. But there's issues for the road network, the bird refuge, getting the water pumped away. Money would be needed for the health service locally to cater for the new residents. The schooling, there needs to be money for a walkway and for more classrooms for the school children. And it goes on. The car parking isn't suitable. The actual fabric of the properties isn't futuristically sustainable. There's very little in there that could have been put in the development to make these properties not reliant on combustibles. There are no car parking, no car charging points, just sites for where they could be. I think the very minimum has been done. for sustainability from an environmental and social aspect. And I am concerned about saying yes to this, even with the threat that hangs above us all. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lloyd. So it has...
Can I just come in there and say I would like to echo what Councillor Lloyd has just said. So
yes,
I would be quite happy to support her recommendation.
Right, so
if I could just step in there, Chairman.
Yes, please.
We have a proposal and a second on the table already, which is to approve the application. That would need to go through a vote before bringing any other motions onto the table.
Yes, I didn't realise Councillor Lloyd had actually proposed to refuse. Anyway,
I think it was, yeah.
Madam Chair, I don't think I actually did, but I was erring that way on my, I was saying, well, you heard what I said.
Yes, but you didn't actually propose.
I didn't, because we haven't voted on the proposal that is on the table, so I believe I cannot make one until we voted on that. Is that correct?
Yes, we'll carry on and deal with this first. So it's been proposed and seconded to permit the application 18-00724, subject to conditions and amendments set out in the report and supplementary papers. So I shall now move to the vote and ask each member of the committee in turn whether they are for, against, or wish to abstain. As an acting chairman, I'm voting for the application.
Madam Chairman, may I say something?
Yes, Councillor Guest.
Just to quickly, before members make up their minds, please remember what I've said. This application is at appeal. If we refuse it tonight, the Secretary of State will determine the application. The things offered by the developer that we are making conditions for will all disappear. The conditions will be imposed by the Secretary of State. We won't like it, I can assure you. It's happened to us before. We lose the advantages that we could have. We can work with the developer and we can enhance these things and get what we want, the best that we possibly can have. If we work with him, if we don't, it's taken away.
Yes. Thank you, Councillor Guest. I think we do understand this. I think the members do understand. So can I go back to the voting, please? As I say, I will vote for it. Councillor Crellin, can I have your vote, please?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm voting for.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Howard?
Against.
Right. Councillor Lloyd?
Against.
And Councillor Lowe?
For.
Thank you. So, Ms. Weaver, could we please read out the results of the vote?
Thank you, Chairman. That was 5 votes for, 2 votes against and no abstentions. So the motion is carried.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So do we have another motion on the table?
No, Chairman, because that one went through, that is the end of the item.
Yes. Right. So, sorry, I've lost my place. Just give me a minute. So, judging by the results, I hereby declare that the application -18-00724 Sinah Lane, Hayling Island has been permitted subject to the conditions stated.
If I could...
I hereby declare the meeting closed.
Julia? Sorry.
Yes, if I could just put in a slight correction there, Chairman. Sorry to butt in.
That's all right.
The resolution is that if the committee had been able to have decided this application, then the Secretary of State be advised that the committee would have granted permission subject to the Section 106 and the
I understand, yes.
set out in the report and amended papers.
Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sorry to butt in.
That's all right. Thank you for your help. So that concludes the meeting for this evening. Thank you, members, and thank you, officers, for your help. Yes?
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good night.